getting an MD or a PhD. We have youth here that sees the opportunity of having higher education and do it to the best of their capacity. And thank you for being here, Dr. Bayat, today. His PhD is in neurodegeneration, which is a fantastic field for a Baha'i, because as you can imagine, he can be of help to many of us. I started asking him many questions just before the session. Thank you so much, please. He's going to tell us about Abdu'l Baha's visit to Stanford.
Thank you, Mina. I could have listened to Zach forever. I think my father could have talked even more. Anyway, thank you. So the subject today is the man who never went to school, which is Abdu'l Baha. So I want to begin with the title. It's a small provocation, the man who never went to school. The man, Abdu'l Baha, never spent a single day in a classroom. He was born into the household of a prisoner. He grew up in exile behind the walls of a penal colony. His education was suffering and his own father's teachings, and not much else that a Stanford professor in 1912 would have recognized as schooling. So he spent most of his life a prisoner and in exile. He didn't spend any time in a classroom. By any measure that the modern scientific Western university of 1912 used to sort people, he should have not belonged on that stage. But in a few hours, he addressed the assembled faculty of exactly that kind of university, a place built to be modern, scientific, forward-looking, the very temple of the new American century. The man who never went to school had come to teach the teachers. I want you to hold that image in your mind, because everything we look at turns on it. Every letter, every newspaper, column, every small act of kindness. So why this story, and why tell it here at Greenacre? Because the threads connect. Quite literally, Abdu'l Baha came here to Greenacre in August of 1912. He walked this ground. He sat under these trees. He blessed this place that Sarah Farmer had built. And 2 months later, he stood at Stanford, 3,000 miles away on the Pacific. The same journey, the same message he carried into the pines of Maine. He carried it into the Assembly Hall of California. The oneness of humanity, the harmony of science and religion, the coming of a new day. Sarah Farmer's vision, here and that October morning out west, are not two separate stories. They're the same, the Greenacre story. So before we go further, let me show you what I'm actually working from. Because for a talk like this, the sources are not a footnote. So there are two archives behind everything. The first is the David Starr Jordan papers. These are held in the special collection at Stanford, which anyone can access, but with permission and reservation. That collection contains all the letters received by Jordan and written by Jordan, or at least the ones we have. It's largely unindexed, so it's mostly by year, and in huge boxes. And half of it is about fish. So, because it is a little bit hard to go read through unless you love biology. So this is the ordinary mail of a university president, and the second is from the National Baha'i Archives, which were very kind to share with me. So, and the interesting thing is that out of these two collections, there is only one letter that's shared between them. So the Baha'i world has been unaware of the correspondence of Jordan before that point. So this is David Starr Jordan, the unlikely host. He was the founding president of Stanford from 1891 to 1913, 22 years. He literally built the place, physically and mentally and everything. He was a world-renowned ichthyologist, which means studier of fish, and all the fishes of America, but also around the world. So he was always collaborating. For some reason, I know a lot about this now. So he was a serious scientist with a serious reputation and a committed peace activist. A public opponent of war at a moment when that was not a comfortable position to hold. He was also a man of his era's blind spots. So he was a complicated man, and many of you know about the complications, but I will touch on that briefly at the end. So this is the point I want to plant right now. Jordan was not a Baha'i. He didn't become one. He was a busy, prominent, skeptical man of science, and he, by my estimates of reading all these letters, was receiving probably 100 or more letters per day and writing a lot, just the same amount. He was writing to everyone. So let's begin with who called whom. Some of you may know, but it's not obvious in Baha'i literature. So Abdu'l Baha's train reached San Francisco at 3 o'clock in the morning on October the 3rd. He had specifically asked for a small reception. He didn't want a crowd. He didn't want a fuss, so almost nobody was there at the platform to welcome him. But that very same day, Stanford's president came to call on him. So let that sit for a moment. Not the Persian visitor petitioning the great American university for an audience. The president came to San Francisco to meet Abdu'l Baha and ask him if he could come and speak. So the famous man went to the prisoner. The other people you'll know who came to visit at the station were Dr. Devlin, Helen Goodall, her daughter Ella Cooper, and the Ralstons. So here's my thesis, the one sentence I'd ask you to carry home. It was not a one-morning event. It was a relationship between the president and Abdu'l Baha and the Baha'is that lasted 17 years. It survives today in a dozen letters since. But most people have not read them. They're not publicly available. So nearly every account of the Stanford visit treats October the 8th as the whole story. So I'm going to explain that it's much more than that. And the curtain did not fall. The letters kept going through 1913, through the 1920s, all the way to 1928, 3 years before Jordan's death. So the morning was not the end of everything. It was the middle. So here's the first surprise. We had to imagine, or we tend to imagine, that an invitation like this happens quickly, right? Invited that day, and then he came a week later? No, it wasn't. A phone call, a note? No. There were 9 months of letters that preceded this event before a single word was spoken at Stanford. So from Jordan's own files, I will trace how the invitation actually came together. This is the document that started all of it. January the 11th, 1912. Jordan writes, and these are his own words on the screen, "I should be delighted to meet Abdu'l Baha if he should come to this coast, and to have him speak to our students." Now stop and count. This is January. The visit will be in October, 9 months early. And notice, nobody pressured him into this. He volunteered it. He'd heard this teacher might be coming to California, and unprompted, he said, "I would be delighted. Send him to my students." And there's one more thing in this letter I want you to catch. He cares about the man's personality, his character, more than his doctrine. This is precisely the lens he judges. So, let's go ahead. This was no isolated whim, because in these very same weeks, Jordan was a man already leaning east. He was leaning east. Look at who he was writing to in January of 1912. corresponding with Ahmad Sohrab of the Persian American Educational Society and with Mirza Ali Quli Khan, the Persian Chargé d'Affaires of the legation in Washington. With Mason Reilly, he was reading about Persia, worrying about Persia, and he was telling his correspondents that he himself intended to travel there, to Persia. This is the texture that the single famous morning completely hides from us. By the time Abdu'l-Baha's train reached California, Jordan was already moving inside a whole world of Persian reformers, diplomats and peace advocates. The invitation didn't drop out of the sky. It grew out of relationships. And the society reached back to him. This is January the 17th. The Persian American Educational Society, signing through Mirza Ahmad Sohrab, writes to tell Jordan that Abdu'l-Baha is coming to America and to offer their help in arranging a meeting in Stanford. And notice the detail I pulled out. His addresses, the letter says, are given entirely free. There is no financial obligation attached. And that detail is moving. This was a national tour mapped out across many states. And the one thing the organizers wanted Jordan to understand up front was nobody was selling anything. The Society's own printed programs and route sheets still survive in our archives. And Stanford was on the map from early on. So this was confirmation to the master, January the 23rd. Remy writes back to Jordan, and here is the sentence that closes the loop. I have communicated its contents to Abdu'l-Baha. I am quite sure that while he is in America, he will be most pleased to visit Stanford and speak to your students. So now we know for certain on paper that Jordan's invitation reached Abdu'l-Baha himself, personally, back in January. From this moment forward, the entire question changes. It is no longer whether he will come to Stanford, it's only a matter of time, and when the calendar allows it. There was a second channel running in parallel, the diplomatic one, January 27th. This is Mirza Ali Quli Khan writing warmly and personally to Jordan. And what's striking, remember he's a Baha'i, and we heard a lot about him yesterday as well. What's striking is these two men were not strangers in 1912. They had already been corresponding as allies in the peace movement for a full year, since the beginning of 1911, and perhaps earlier than that. So the invitation to Stanford did not come through a single door. It came through several at once. Remy on one side, the Persian legation on the other, the society in the middle. Three separate relationships, all converging on the same result. Of course, no real plan is without a snag. And this one had a scheduling problem, though one with a happy ending. Jordan worried about the timing. I fear that he may be in California at an unfortunate time. Our university closes the 21st of May and does not reopen until the 31st of August. Now think about that little mundane little calendar note, and every university associated person knows about summer calendars. Had it happened in the spring, the campus would have been empty. Summer recess, students gone home. By pushing it into October, the academic calendar guaranteed that all 1,800 students, and the school was closed on that day for Abdu'l-Baha's visit, and has never closed since. It's pretty much the only day in history of Stanford that's being closed. Even Sundays, it's still pretty operational. Okay, so the constraint, in other words, made the moment. A small administrative worry produced a full house. Here's that very worry in Jordan's own hand. We should be delighted to have Abdu'l-Baha speak before our students, but I fear that he may be in California at an unfortunate time. Such a small human thing, a busy president checking his academic calendar against a visitor's itinerary. And I didn't see him do that for other people. But it is the hinge of the whole story. On one side of this hinge is a spring visit to an empty campus that nobody would remember. On the other side is an October morning, a packed assembly hall, and a standing ovation that we're still talking about 114 years later. And here is the moment the invitation physically arrives at the master's desk. 2 letters side by side on the screen. Jordan writes to Sohrab on February the 6th, and the Society writes back on the 14th with this line: "A translation of your letter was immediately forwarded to Abdu'l Baha, forwarded to him, translated, and placed in his hands." And this is the single document that exists in both of the archives. It's in the Jordan papers at Stanford and in the Sohrab papers in Wilman. It's the one place the 2 collections touch. Everything else is complementary. So let me put the whole negotiation together so you can see its shape at a glance. 11 documents in 34 days. January 11th, the first invitation. The 17th, the Society's offer. The 23rd, Rimi's confirmation that it had reached the master. The 27th, Khan's warm reply. The 29th, the scheduling worry. February 6th, the formal invitation. The 14th, forwarded to Abdu'l Baha. 3 independent channels, all active inside the same 5 weeks. And I want to insist on this, because it's easy to imagine that the Stanford visit was a happy accident. It was not an accident, it was a convergence. Many hands, many letters, pulling it in the same direction at the same time. And then nothing, silence for 8 months. I struggled to find any letters in that period, and it was a lot of letters. I went through probably 20,000 letters over that year or so period. It was in tens of boxes. It was tiring, but really exciting when you did find one. But I did not find one in that 8-month period. So it goes quiet through the spring and the summer, or at least in the thousands of letters I reviewed. And then in September, a sudden revival. Dr. Frederick Devlin writes to Jordan on September the 22nd. And notice what he is and isn't doing. He's not introducing a brand new idea. He is reviving the January plan, picking up the thread that had gone slack, but now from the California end. This is the moment the whole effort hands off from the Washington channel to the local one, from the diplomats and the Society to the Bay Area friends who will actually make it happen on the ground. And what was the prior connection between Devlin and Jordan? Based on a handful of letters that I reviewed from that summer, it seems that they were both avid California bird lovers, conservationists, and they were writing to each other occasionally, and they probably met in San Francisco to discuss, preserving birds. So birds and fish is the theme of this song. And Devlin was a Baha'i doctor in San Francisco. The other, the university president. Here's Devlin's letter itself, handwritten. You can see it, September the 22nd, 1912. He writes, "In a few days, Abdu'l Baha, the Persian savant and apostle of universal peace, will be in San Francisco. He is a most unique messenger and has spoken before several of the Eastern universities. It might be that you would desire his presence at Stanford." And I love this document. A Bay Area physician, in a few lines of looping fountain pen handwriting, quietly restarting the entire thing. No fanfare, just, "It might be that you would desire his presence." And I can share the full transcription. October the 2nd. Now we are scheduling the master's actual hour. Jordan writes directly and personally to Abdu'l Cooper, a Bay Area Baha'i, the wife of Charles Mason Cooper. And Charles Mason Cooper was a doctor in that area and became associated with Stanford by the time that this was happening as well. So they were in the same circles. He was a Stanford professor under Jordan, essentially. And that's another story. So this is to fix the time of the address. He says to Ella Cooper, "I am sure of an audience," he tells her. He's been preparing for a year, remember? He's sure. 2 things to notice here. First, this is the president of the university, personally handling the scheduling. And in all that letters I looked at, he did not personally handle scheduling of visitors. It was not a common thing. This was a unique event. He's writing the believer himself. Second, remember the name Ella Goodall Cooper. She was the daughter of Helen Goodall, one of the very earliest members of the Bay Area Baha'i community. And she's going to walk back into this story 13 years from now, in 1925. So, her story and Ella Bailey's story are two other projects of mine, pet projects, anyway. Okay, so the campus machinery is now turning, still October the 2nd, on the very same day that Jordan writes Ella Goodall Cooper about the timing. He also books his medical school dean, Ray Lyman Wilbur, who would himself one day become the second president of Stanford. And that's an interesting story on its own. To Dean Wilbur, he writes, "We also expect the Baha at some time during the week." This is how he referred to Abdu'l as the Baha. It was a very busy week for Jordan, that's what I gathered. And he seemed to be clearing his and the whole school's schedule for Abdu'l Baha's visit. And here's a detail that gives you the flavor of the place. Just 2 days after Abdu'l Baha speaks, Prince Lazarevich of Serbia will speak in the same assembly hall. It was the hub for the voices of the world. The assembly hall hosted a steady stream of international visitors, which is why a part of an invitation is a Persian teacher felt natural to Jordan. His hall already belonged to the whole world. And then the day before, October 7th, a telegram from Devlin. He wires Jordan with a logistical request. And I'll read it. Kindly provide accommodations for local and Persian reporters at Abdu'l Baha reception. Local and Persian reporters. They were expecting the press. Not just the local Palo Alto papers, but Persian correspondents too. It tells you something important. In the terms of 1912, this was a media event. It was planned that way. The organizers were arranging press coverage a full day in advance because they understood that what was about to happen was news. So part 2. I'm going to pause the calendar for a moment and show you the people again. This is the part I think gets lost. No single person arranged this visit. No one hero in the story who made it happen. It was a web, 9 separate intermediaries, stretching from the diplomatic salons of Washington all the way to the Baha'i parlors of the Bay Area. This is how they were connected. At the center stands Jordan. On the one side, you have the Washington Channel, Rimi, Sohrab, Ali Kuli Khan, and the Persian American Educational Society, planning the national route. On the other side, the Bay Area Channel, Devlin, Ella Goodall Cooper, Dean Wilbur handling the campus, and at the very end, Abdu'l Baha himself. And here it is, each of the 9 named and placed. Rimi, who carried the invitation, Sohrab, the society secretary, Khan, the diplomat, Devlin, the physician, Ella Goodall Cooper, the host, Dean Wilbur, the campus, Clarence Reed, the Unitarian pastor, who introduced the evening talk, and Ramona Brown, the 15-year-old girl whom we are about to meet, and whose eyewitness account is the most precious testimony we have. Every single name is a documented correspondent here. Not one is legend. Every one is paper. And this is the morning everyone remembers. 5 minutes? Okay. The heart of the whole story. So let me do for you what I've tried. Fix it firmly against the documents. The introduction. Jordan rose before his faculty and his students, and he said this about the guest. It is our portion to have with us one of the great religious teachers of the world, one of the natural successors of the old Hebrew prophets. Think about this sentence. The president of Stanford, a scientist, a skeptic, a man addressing a hall full of modern skeptics, and he is introducing a Persian visitor who is known as a successor of the Hebrew prophets. And he was. but they're skeptics, right? So, now the room itself, Stanford's Assembly Hall. 1,800 students, 180 members of the faculty, 2,000 people all told. He spoke for 75 minutes, and one witness, Lua Getzinger, described the quality of the silence, such splendid attention, not a murmur, not a disturbance. And because we have the newspaper account, we can be even more precise than memory usually allows. We have the exact words and everything. And the address itself, what did he actually say to them? I'm going to skip this, but this is a subject of the Irfan colloquium I presented, the actual talk he gave, and how unique it was for that time. He was talking to the greatest minds of America at that time, but the things he was saying, many of them already did not actually believe at that time. In fact, the things he said about evolution and genetics and so on, it took 30 years after that time for the scientific community even believe them, let alone the public. So that is a profound thing. So he says that science and religion are not enemies and were never meant to be. That reality is a single unified whole. This is the Palo Alto newspaper. I was blessed to be on the Palo Alto LSA, and I was asked to hold the archives for them until we had a permanent place for them, and they gave me permission to scan their copy of this newspaper, and so that's what this is. So the same edition printed the entire address under the title, To the World of Science, translated by Dr. Farid, the day, the hour, everything else documented. So there's one image from that address I simply have to share because it shows you how his mind works. He moved in a single motion from the atom to the entire human race. If the elements themselves, the atoms, the particles of matter, live together in harmony, he asked the scientists, why on earth should humanity wage war? Mahmoud, who was there, wrote this. The entire audience was overcome with admiration. The applause shook the building to its very foundation. It shook the building. They didn't just clap politely and file out, they cheered. And in the Irfan presentation I gave a few years ago, I went through each of the different people he spoke to and the dramatic effects that they had on the world after that point. So that is a fascinating thing. So what in the end did Jordan himself say of him? He will surely unite the East and the West, for he walks the mystic way with practical feet. After the talk, Jordan hosted him in his house, and he walked past the comfortable guest room and lay down in the children's room. And that affected Jordan's wife dramatically, and she talked about it a bit later. So we've been reading the letters and newspapers, the public record, but I'm going to now hand it over to the girl. He reached for a bunch of grapes and dropped them into my glass of water. I looked at them and he laughed as he saw that I was puzzled as to what to do. He did lots of these little things with people, and this made them love him so much. To another lady, he said, weep on, beyond the tears is sunshine. So this is a beautiful note from that time. The comforter he was. This is from young Ramona. And there I saw the master standing alone in the quadrangle. Hesitatingly, I approached him and asked permission to take his photograph. So this 15-year-old girl standing in the square of Stanford, Abdu'l Baha had one moment where he was on his own and took his picture. Then we know about the stories of how Abdu'l Baha visited the staff, the maids, the pages, the groom, the cook, gathered the servants, and he told them that he stood as a father to them, and he gave each one of them a gift before he left. He spoke to servants just the same way as he spoke to presidents. After the hour, this is another area that we don't know that much about. So, the very next day, October the 9th, 24 hours after the talk, Jordan sits down and writes directly to Abdu'l, who is now in Los Angeles. What does he write? This will introduce you to my daughter, Miss Edith M. Jordan. So he is personally writing to Abdu'l and then also to his daughter to introduce each other. It was very important to him. And this tells you what he was really feeling at that time. Something which he couldn't say in public. This is his private letter. Here's that letter, addressed to Abdu'l himself. So, yeah, it's amazing. He wants Abdu'l to meet his daughter. And now, this is what he says. He is an interesting old gentleman. His doctrine is almost self-evident, but he is a kindly person. So this is no faculty watching, no newspaper taking notes. This is how he felt. But it doesn't end there. October the 14th, 6 days after the talk. This is the voice in the whole archive that I trust the most. Abdu'l is the leader of the new Persian religion of international peace and brotherly love. He is an interesting old gentleman, and he said that he would like to meet you personally. His doctrine is almost self-evident, but he is a kindly person. There is no advantage to Jordan speaking about Abdu'l like this, but this was what he said. And then 10 full years later, Jordan does something that settles the question. In his own autobiography, published in 1922, Jordan writes of the kindly apostle of peace and brotherhood, Abdu'l. So there's a beautiful paragraph in that book about Abdu'l's visit. So, but it doesn't end on October 8th either. It keeps going. 1925, Jordan writes about a promising young Baha'i named Leroy Iles. He seems to me a young man of marked promise who ought not to lose the advantages of a college education. Now you can see how the chords, they twist and they turn, and how the history of the Baha'i faith is actually affected by what this man does periodically. It makes your skin tingle a little bit. And then, 1926, he requests and distributes Baha'i literature on the persecutions in Persia. Please send me more copies where they will do good. And then 1927 to 28, he writes the Stanford registrar to help Ali Quli Khan's daughter Marziah Gale gain admission. And she graduated at Stanford in 1929 and went on, as we heard yesterday, and all of you know. This was his last influence on Baha'i history, basically. And so James Russell spoke beautifully about that. So 1 month after the talk, things just kept moving. He went on to write Jordan wrote this beautiful editorial in the Palo Alto, the same Simpkins who had interviewed Abdu'l. And 1 month after the talk, so 17 years later, in his own hand, this is the ark. It's not a morning. It lasted a long time, and I didn't obviously read the next 30 years of his life. It would have taken me forever, but from bits and pieces. Now, I wanted to address this one issue because anybody who hears about Jordan, they know that, or they've heard about him being a prominent member of the eugenics movement. And so I'm just going to touch on that briefly. It wasn't the purpose of this project to settle what the man truly believed. It was narrower work, to read and scan those 20,000, and I didn't know at the time it would be that many letters, but I was expecting just 5. Looking for the ones that included Abdu'l. But reviewing those 20,000 letters, I saw only about 40, which were about eugenics. Half of them were from eugenics conferences inviting him to speak, and the other 20 were his polite refusals to attend. So by this point, he was not publicly but privately disconnecting himself from these things. And but that's not the subject of this talk. But I have to wonder whether the label has been taken out of context. By the time of Abdu'l-Baha's visit, and especially in the months that followed, he would tell everybody that his focus was only on world peace. So, and Abdu'l-Baha said, "May the first flag of international peace be upraised in the state." And as many of you are aware, in 1945, at the end of World War II, it was raised in San Francisco. So, this was a university full of teachers that rose to its feet for the man who never went to school. And I'm not going to go through these, but you can see where these research came from. Thank you.